Alex, you want to introduce yourself?
Where's
Hello?
Zach?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexander Hafez, co-founder of Circular Genomics here in Albuquerque. It's a startup company that's using a novel biomarker of RNA that's circularized to help predict antidepressant response for individuals with depression. I've been involved with the company now for about 3 years, was founding CEO of the company, currently manage operations and corporate development.
I was just going to say, I can see Zach's head back there, who is deep in conversation, and I think is coming this way, but he's also not looking this direction. Zachary. Or maybe not. My name's Nerissa Whittington. I am a serial optimizer and somewhat entrepreneur, fourth generation, almost New Mexican. My great-grandmother, or granny, located herself in Tucumcari, New Mexico in the early 1900s. And so therefore, we're sort of almost New Mexicans by wherever we were born. That has shaped my thought process because she was a single mother of multiple boys in a very small town in a time not very welcoming to women, or entrepreneurs probably, in Tucumcari, who knows. But it was that idea that she could do anything, and she started a rooming house, which then turned into motels, that turned into other things, and other businesses with her boys. But that idea of the Wild West, and I think that that's an interesting idea about New Mexico. And I know we talked about what shapes our ideas, and I think that's one of the things that does shape my idea. Our Wild West episode right now that's been going on nearly 23 years is BigByte. We are a technology campus and mainly a data center here in the elbow of the innovation corridor in downtown Albuquerque.
Zach?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Zachariah Ben. Yeah, it's Ben. I am Zachariah Ben of the Navajo tribe. I am the owner and co-founder of Bidii Baby Foods, which is an agriculture cooperative that is domestically incorporated through the Navajo Nation. We reside there near Shiprock, New Mexico in the Four Corners region. We've also established a 501c3 called the Ben Initiative, which is an acronym for Birth, Environment, Nutrition Initiative, to allow us to leverage grant funding into our LLC rather than having to rely on loans and capital and build up debt or build on more debt into our entrepreneurial system that resides there on the Navajo Nation.
Hey there, I'm Vince Kadlubek. I'm one of the co-founders of Meow Wolf in Santa Fe. Born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Third generation. Mom grew up in Tesuque. Graduated from Santa Fe High. I'm some product of the public school system here in New Mexico, proudly. And currently on the board of directors at Meow Wolf and a senior advisor to our executive team, primarily our CEO, Jose Tolosa, and our chief creative strategist, Ann Mullen. And I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So New Mexico is a very rich culture, very diverse culture, and we want to understand how that contributes to the economy, but also more importantly, how can we further leverage that?
Okay. Hi. I have very interesting things to say on the topic of diversity, but something that Zach said in one of our pre-planning calls has really kind of hit me. How do we build out versus up? And something we're really great at in New Mexico is building silos. And I think that's true as we talk about our diverse culture. And you can be a part of this and in this silo, or you can be a part of this and in this silo. And how do we start building bridges between those silos, I think is important for our future entrepreneurial ecosystem. But I think it also makes us a place that could be great for things like government contracting. We have lots of minorities, lots of women, lots of voices that can then get those contracts and see that mentor-mentee programs through the government. But we also have that diversity of voices that I'm a fan of when we look at the proliferation of the, I think he called it flexible work and remote work. We have that ability, I think, to lend voices to other organizations and other work cultures. And I think we need to do a better job as entrepreneurs as well as just business people of seeing and finding those voices. Though I was having a conversation with John in the back about how do you find people, since the Albuquerque Journal classified ads isn't necessarily how we find anything anymore, right? So we have to really look at how do we change that, how do we change our process of looking and seeking and finding others when we're so great at building these silos and building them up instead of out. I don't know if that actually answered the question, sorry.
Yeah, and I think piggyback off of that, I think when we were on that pre-plan calling meeting, the intention to that was, as Bidii Baby Foods, when we started this company, we decided that we wanted access to healthy, traditional, nutrient-dense, traditional food that is, preserving our water rights and our land rights there on the Navajo Nation. So going into that business model of being able to be cognitive of your environmental, social inputs and outputs as a business now, using Western business structure to provide that type of system. And you realize that you cannot solely rely on your own ecosystem there on the reservation, because our numbers are far worse than the state of New Mexico's, even though we contribute some of those numbers to the 40%. And I feel like, what can we do to work out of that? We have to build up our own ecosystem, and that's to break those cycles of historical, intergenerational trauma, using this business, entrepreneurship to heal that, entrepreneurship to heal those opportunities and provide them for our local economy. And that was not siloing ourselves out, but being able to build ourselves horizontally rather than vertically. So that with that, we're looking at a social return of investment rather than an individual ROI.
Excellent. Anyone else?
I'll add on to that. From our company here, our purpose has been really to help reduce the time to effective care for individuals with depression. Right now, if you have depression, it's really a trial and error process. Your doctor prescribes your medication. You go through probably 3, 4, or 5 cycles of trial and error to see what's going to work, what dose is going to work. We're trying to develop a blood test so we can predict this before treatment. But when it comes to diversity, really from the product side of what our company is doing, we're trying to destigmatize depression as well in our society. Patients, it affects everybody, whether you are male or female, LGBTQ, different ethnicities. It really affects everybody. It is a biological disorder. It is a disease that can affect anybody at any point in time. So from, the diversity piece here, really, one of the things we're emphasizing as a company is how do we make sure that we're always making people feel welcome, that they're interested in the technology that we're developing, that we can reach everybody that needs this type of test, because it is a condition that can affect anybody at any point in time, regardless of any, your economic status, any of the demographics that you're in. It's something that can be really hurting you, affecting you, and then also your family and sort of your work, colleagues, everybody that's around you are all affected by it. Thanks.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm going to be a bit of a broken record probably on this panel. I'm a big believer in storytelling. I'm a big believer in marketing, and what it means to build a brand and how you build a brand. I think when thinking about the statewide, ecosystem here in New Mexico and how we leverage the value of the diversity that we have in this state, it comes down to how we tell our story. And, I think our tourism department has done a pretty good job of telling the story of our state and the diversity in our state. We can always kind of be better at that. But it's always kind of pretty remarkable to me how little we connect brand campaigns to economic development. Because where I come from, the entirety of economic development for Meow Wolf was a brand campaign. It was telling a story about why we're cool and why we're valuable, and getting articles about that and getting eyeballs on that story, and then having people be able to recognize and see the value. And I just don't see those stories. Meow Wolf forced our way into that story. and we're a unique situation. But from an economic development standpoint, it's like I don't think all the stories are being told. I don't think the brand campaign's there. I think we all sit in this room and say, like, there's so much opportunity in New Mexico. And we've been saying that forever. We've been saying that for years and years and years. There's so much opportunity in New Mexico. Like, oh, it's a Wild West. Oh, it's a blank canvas. Oh, we have so much potential. And it's like, all right, let's start telling the story about it. Like, let's stop talking about the potential of it and let's highlight the stories, and attract, use these assets that we have. And the diversity at this point, like, I don't know if y'all have been, following cultural trends at all, but diversity is actually a very attractive asset these days. Like, people want, like, legit, authentic cultural expression. They don't want Applebee's, they don't want Chili's, they don't want Facebook. And so we actually sit in a really great moment, culturally speaking, if we just tell our story. And tourism does it. Economic development, though, for whatever reason, doesn't think about itself as a brand, as a brand and building an identity.
Excellent, excellent. So every ecosystem has its challenges, and we have our own unique set of challenges. So I wanted to talk about those, but more importantly, the solutions for those challenges.
I mean, it's an ecosystem of challenges, obviously. It's like we don't have the housing for the workers. People don't want to live here in New Mexico. Lots of people don't, or move here or stay here after they graduate from high school because they don't want to raise a family in a state that has poor education. And well, how are we going to change education if we don't have the funding to change education? We don't have the economic ecosystem to generate the profits to then feed into our education system. It's like a whole ecosystem of it. And we're always talking about, well, it's this, no, it's actually that. It's that, no, it's not, it's that. And I think going back to the broken record, I think it's you change that by changing the story and the narrative and painting a vision of how New Mexico could be. I almost said Meow Wolf, but you paint a vision of where we could be. Like, we all talk about the problems. We're really good at talking about the problems, but who's stepping up and saying, here's what New Mexico could look like 10 years from now? We don't have a clear understanding of that.
Well, and I think all of us sitting here as entrepreneurs can say, if somebody in your staff came to you and said that, you'd say, well, but what's the solution? Give me the solution, not the problem, right?
Yeah, we can work towards the vision of a solution. Mm-hmm. But as long as we're talking about the problems, we're just reacting to the problems. And I think that's one of that reactive nature, right? Where's our proactive stance? And I think about that a lot with one of the things, what are the solutions? And I think Santa Fe Indian School had a really great one called COOL, Cultivating Our Own to Lead. We were honored to help them during the pandemic, train people who could actually put in internet into people's homes, because it was cultivating our own to do these things, not hiring a company out of Phoenix to come in and do the thing that we need done. And we don't look at those internal solutions, whatever they may be. And oftentimes it's because we're unable to stick on an idea, which you also sort of alluded to. We had this great concept of economic development with Governor Richardson. We also had the concept of solar with Governor Richardson. And film. And then those things were torn down, and now we're rebuilding those things back up. And so we're doing this interesting cycle of not planning really well. And so it's disturbing to me because I look at how I'm investing, how my staff is investing, how their families are investing, and what jobs are they investing towards. And so when I look at what our main issues as an industry in the data center industry, we look at things like infrastructure. We, of course, look at capital, and we look at workforce. And so we're trying to get off our own bums and help to make some differences there of how do we educate our own, how do we do something to create the staff that we need. Because I love Stu's comment of, well, I'm kind of confused. We say we don't have the staff, but then our staff is leaving because they don't have an opportunity, and we don't. And it comes again to that, some of those tenets of, well, we have to look at how we reach and connect to each other. But I think as we talk about ideas and solutions, I think we have to look towards
somewhat on our state level or even our federal level, what is that future long-range plan? What is that 5, 10, 20-year plan for economic development, for investment development? Where are we going to track ourselves and what's the bar we're holding ourselves towards, because we're not allowing for that consistency of investment. And so if we're bringing someone in to invest, or if we're asking someone to invest their own money, what is that consistency and availability of investment in that planning?
Yeah, I'll start a little bit with my story here in New Mexico. I moved here 13 and a half years ago to actually do my undergrad degree at UNM. And I ended up becoming the example of the land of entrapment, where I did my undergrad, my PhD, my MBA, and 3 days after finishing my PhD, I helped found this company. And really the reason why, part of the reasons why I had to start my own company here in New Mexico was I had a PhD in biomedical science and an MBA. And there was probably 0 jobs in the state for me at that time when I graduated. My entire cohort was either a postdoc here at UNM or has left New Mexico. And every year, my PhD program graduates 10 to 15, 20 students, and there's not a single job for them here in New Mexico. So I think for me, I somewhat took those matters into my own hand and created a job for me here. But I think that, is an example of why we have a talent issue here in the state as well. There's one, we don't have the support for biotech. We've got plenty of talent here that's graduating that could fill into those roles, but we don't, have an industry that's built up to support it. There was, a nice bioscience bill last year that got vetoed that would have been really supportive to our industry. I think right now it's for biotech, it's hard to grow a company in New Mexico. You look at our company today, our executives span both coasts of the country. We have some talent here locally in New Mexico. Our lab is here, but for commercial operations, we're now looking elsewhere because it's hard to, find the partnerships, find the right space, find the talent here because it honestly, it just doesn't exist. So we face a lot of headwinds in our day-to-day function operations as a company. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. We've got the talent that graduates every single year. We have the capital. We're considering the infrastructure, but it's really getting people to move on these things that we have and the opportunities that exist ahead of us. For bioscience, it's an industry that we can't really think about what it's going to look like in 2 to 3 years from now. We're thinking 10 years, 20 years, 30 years out. But it is an opportunity for a high-tech industry that can provide high-wage positions for individuals, support, all the way from a lab technician all the way up to executives. Really has a diverse opportunity for employment here, but it's just not getting the level of investment that it really needs and the level of interest from the state to support it here in New Mexico. I'm excited for what the future has for us here as a company, but it's, I can't say that it's been easy either.
Yeah, I think you heard from my other co-panels is that, entrepreneurs are problem solvers. They fill in the gaps of what our ecosystem lacks or does not have. And I feel like that's something we're doing as Bidii Baby Foods, is being able to provide those types of resources for our community and build up our own ecosystem there. What that looks like is addressing the social determinants of health that impact our community. It's lack of access to quality public education, no infrastructure exists, being able to gain access to high-speed internet. We're still on a 3G network out there, it seems like. And those are things that I feel like, coming from that environment, what can we do to create a better environment for our children? And that is a lot of inspiration from our firstborn 2.5 years ago. And I feel like that should be our main motivator, because we forget, our natural resources. When you look at our natural resources, we think immediately oil, gas, water, land, but then we forget about our youth, our number one natural resource there. And so with that, being that, I think being that father, being that parent to not only your community, but to your own children, what type of environment do you want them to grow up in? And so with that, that's why entrepreneurship became healing for myself and my family, was that it allows us to break those cycles and build new ones, and healthy ones, especially by that. So with that, being able to have our children inherit, the ability to thrive rather than inherit the abilities to survive. And I feel like that's the major case that we face here in the state of New Mexico, because of how diverse yet rural we can be. And we leave each other out, and we leave each other, that community, that sense of community out. And so, what are we leaving behind for our children to inherit? And I think that should be the number one motivator for a lot of entrepreneurs moving forward, is what type of investments do we make now so our children can inherit that for the future.
I think the state has done a great job of supporting industries where our labor force is a great match and strong. We have the space and film, and manufacturing is where I'm beginning to focus with my battery company. We've had Intel for decades. Maxion's coming in. We have defense. In our case, I think the labor force is here. Tesla was looking at the state for, a battery factory. I've been speaking with the former chief technology officer of CATL, which is the largest battery company in the world. He said they looked very seriously at the Borderplex region for the strength in the rail system, the industrial gas supply, and the labor force out of Las Cruces and El Paso. I think that exists up here too with Maxion and Intel. So I think, we have to take advantage of these industries where we have a strong workforce and really scale them and create economies around those scaled companies where those people leave and start other companies and scale those. And I think that's a key to growth in diversifying the economy away from oil and gas. So anyone else on this?
I think right now it's funny. That's a funny story, because that's a narrative that we face currently in the northwest region of the state, is that a lot of our people, Navajo people especially, relied heavily on the extraction, industrialization of that happened in that area. We worked the coal mines, we worked the uranium mines, we worked the oil and gas, and now we face those repercussions. So what are we doing to not only heal ourselves but heal our planet now? And I think that's where, again, entrepreneurs are those problem solvers, because we work in agriculture, we work in the regenerative field of being able to, not always extract what you, basically looking at it as what you extract, you put back in, a sense of reciprocity for the environment that you are growing your business in, your children in, but also each other. And that's something that I feel like we forget about. And those are things that we are making those types of investments now, so our children can use that for the future, and their children's children.
You've said a couple times, and I totally agree with you, entrepreneurs are problem solvers. And I love that this is a panel with entrepreneurs on the panel talking about the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the state, because what we oftentimes lack in government is entrepreneurial mindset. And yeah, entrepreneurs are problem solvers, but the way that we do it is that we create a vision. We don't care about the current state. The current state's irrelevant. Like the current problems, the problems of today are irrelevant. We care about the vision of where we're going. And we work really hard on like articulating that vision, like with a food company, with a biotech company, with an arts company. Like we say, here's what it could look like. And when Meow Wolf started in 2000, started this journey in 2014, we had no money in our bank account. We had no employees. We had no business skills. We had never done anything like this before. We had never brought a single dollar of revenue into the company. And we put together a vision that said within 5 years, we're going to have 500 employees. We're going to be in 3 different cities. We're going to be making $100 million a year in revenue. It was bonkers for us to create that vision, but we did. And when you create that vision, you then say, okay, what's realistically happening today? And what are the problems of today? Then you start looking at the problems today. What do we have to do to then get to that vision? And you start selling that vision. You sell it to people. You sell it to investors. You sell it to people who are coming to go work for you. And so I'm talking about this at a microcosm, and I'm saying that the state at a macro level, I don't see that or feel that or know that. And it would be great for like leadership to be entrepreneurial and for leadership to put together vision of where this state could be in 20 years and start working towards that.
I have done a lot of government work or been a contractor for the government in a lot of different ways. And that statement just reminds me something from the past speakers as well as, mentors and mentees is great, right? The state of New York actually just put out an RFP looking for coaches for their government staff. And I thought that was a really novel idea, and it's probably not that novel. Probably other states do it. We don't grow our leaders. We don't grow our leaders to be challenged to do more. And I know that there are several state employees in the building, and I would just, encourage you to run that up the flagpole, because that's a really great idea. How can we coach our current team that we were hard to recruit them, got them into state government, are trying to then have them help us create our future? What are we coaching them up to? How are we enabling them to that success? And I think about that in a lot of areas of government, even year-round legislature. And I know that that's something that's probably groans from the audience, but I really think that would be to be and to manifest that educated mindset of we are intelligent enough to move forward because we have all of these other opportunities. We are enabling ourselves to improve as a state on a state level. When we think about what is available at the state level and things that we don't talk about, but we did talk about on our call, is what do we do to maintain a company in New Mexico? We talked about that, how you go from 5 to 10 to 20. But even if you're not that giant company, what are the incentives for you? What if your customers are New Mexicans, not outside of the state? Well, good luck getting JTEP or any of the other lovely funding mechanisms, because they don't apply to you. But what are we doing to keep these companies here? What are we doing to keep the people in the jobs that have gotten there, to make them better, to make us better, to all of us challenge each other? I think that's probably not what you were talking about, but kind of where I decided to take that football.
I do greatly appreciate the efforts that's been put towards the various funds for startups in New Mexico. We've seen a lot of headlines on that, and I think that's an incredible feeding of an ecosystem, and looking towards startups rather than established growth stage or even further companies is awesome. I would say that more support for entrepreneurs. It's so funny because I did some client work with UNM and with Rainforest here, and they asked me. They said, we want to talk about what kind of, what this building could look like, and have it be a hub for entrepreneurism. And I was like, well, to understand what would be a hub for entrepreneurism, you have to understand who an entrepreneur is and what their mindset is and what they are attracted to and what they're not attracted to. Most entrepreneur hubs are like the most boring spaces possible. They're blank. They're very, architecturally designed. There's hardly any creativity or vibe or culture. And that's what is repulsive to most entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs are like borderline Like they could be like a successful entrepreneur. They might also end up in jail. Like they are pretty anti-authority and they're pretty anti like establishment. And so when we were starting to talk, I was like, well, if we're doing an entrepreneurial hub, we need a music venue, we need arts, we need beer, we need drinks, we need food. We need it to be vibey. And, you know, and I think what's been interesting about Denver and Colorado and the transformations they've gone through over the last 20 years, so much of it has been like these big policies, obviously marijuana, but there's been a cultural movement in Colorado that kind of started first. It was a cultural movement of youth and thinking outside of the norm, and it was reflected through policies that then made its way onto headlines that then started to tell the story that holy shit, Denver is like really fucking cool. Like legalizing marijuana, what? You know, and then it takes New Mexico another decade to do it. But like that started the narrative that then attracted the entrepreneur to be like, oh, that's a cool place. That's a place I want to be. And like the economy wasn't great at the time. There wasn't that much like cultural or vibey things to do in Denver, but that started the ball rolling that then started to really expand their economy. Anyway, I'm rambling, but this is the stuff I think about.
We got plenty of time. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add on to this a bit here. I think one of the issues I think I've noticed here is that we often just do what is enough and we don't do what is actually needed to get things done. You know, I think the ecosystem has resources for early stage startups. I think there's more that can be done on middle and late stage companies here. But you know, but I think by doing just what is enough, we're not making ourselves competitive really across the United States and the world as an entrepreneurial ecosystem. You look at other states, you know, and other cities, San Diego, Austin, Denver, that are really positioning themselves to lead startup companies, have the right infrastructure, the talent, the finance, or the capital, everything around those companies to help support them, not just from the very beginning, but all the way through to exit. And we're not really positioning New Mexico as a place right now with the resources to do that for a company from beginning all the way to end. There has been some that have made it, but it gets increasingly hard the further along you get here. And the lack of, you know, competitiveness, you know, comparing us to other states increases the risk for startups to leave. You know, if you don't have a fund that can lead an A round or a B round here in New Mexico, those are stages in a startup where they're at risk of leaving New Mexico. So those are $5-10 million checks that you're seeing from a fund that just don't exist here right now. You know, I think on the talent piece in a post-COVID world here where a lot of people can work remotely, it becomes increasingly more difficult, not just to attract people in from out of state, but also to keep in-state employees working here for companies in New Mexico. Because if you're here, there's often a company that's in San Diego that's willing to pay you a San Diego wage for you to work here. And our wages in New Mexico are not adjusting to those either. So, you know, I think there's issues from compensation. When you look at infrastructure here, lab space just really doesn't exist for biotech. You know, we're in Stu's facility right now, and it's been helpful for us since day one. But for us to scale and for us to grow as a company, there's literally nowhere for us to go right now. And for, you know, without looking out of New Mexico. So I think, you know, there's issues really across the board that, and there's, to be quite frank, there's solutions for all of them that could really help the state grow and help position us for what needs to be done. You know, I think there's incentives that can be done for executives and to help improve pay for individuals here. JTIP is, you know, very focused into specific categories of types of employees, but I think there needs to be a review done around that. I think facility space needs to be focused on and invested in by the state to ensure that there's room for companies to not just be started here, but also to grow here. I think we need to position ourselves to be competitive with other cities and other states, or it's just going to be an ongoing risk, and we're going to constantly just see companies develop and then leave. And that's a problem that we have faced, and we're just going to keep facing it the further we continue down the path we're on right now.
Yeah, it's a unique challenge because we have this super high tech coming out of the labs, and then the workforce challenge is, the talent is there at the schools. I'm talking to a Tesla engineer that came out of UNM, and one of the most successful battery entrepreneurs in U.S. history is sitting in this room right now. So how do we, leverage this? How do we, master the boomerang? How do we, reverse this process? Because it's going to be critical to scale. Without the workforce, there will be no scaling companies. And is that the universities meeting these entrepreneurs like us on the stage in the middle and bringing the labor to them, or is it more of an effort on the boomerang piece? It's a really unique challenge.
Well, and I do appreciate that the state worked to get funding that we're not now just funding. This opportunity scholarship is allowing us to actually have people who are certified. So if those certifications is a big deal. We're in the tech industry, so we often looked at things that probably are not, the sexy tech of batteries, but or genome things. But I need somebody who can do routers. I need somebody who can do switches. I need somebody who can do X, Y, Z. And those are things that can be funded now. That whole system needs to be tweaked, because I don't think I have any employee that wants to go through a FAFSA application in order to then get that training and get that certification. But the idea that it's there, and there needs to be consistency with that planning. And again, I will continue to beat this drum that it is important that we have some consistency from the state in their planning and in their thought process and how they fund and what they plan for. We had the New Mexico partnership born and funded, and then now essentially being whatever's happening there. There's not a consistency in how we're doing economic development. So who do we have the conversation with about how we maintain or how we grow or what we need in workforce or what those ideas are? I don't know. Does anybody remember Next Gen or Sushi Gig? I know you do. Some of you people I remember drinking with back then. And so those were two great fun things. Sushi Gig was super informal. Thank you, Webb Johnson, for sacrificing probably half of your liver to that effort. But it made us all talk to each other, and it was weird and it was fun. But it was also really backed by his employer at the time, Next Gen Clusters, which was all about getting clusters of New Mexico and growing those clusters. And then we suffered the same thing that we typically suffer in New Mexico, which is then we had 87 other ones start. And so instead of joining forces and growing together and rising the tide and raising the ships, we're competing against each other and not trying to work together and raise each other up. We're doing that New Mexico thing of, the crab bucket, or you have it and I hate you and I will kill you because you have it. And so looking at, what is that consistency in leadership, and how can leadership help some of these nonprofits or organizations band together to help raise the tide and raise the ships? What can we do to make some of these things functional so that when we look at this group of entrepreneurs we're trying to start, how are they able to move through this process perhaps easier and more efficiently than we are? I'm rambling too. No. Sorry.
Yeah, on our prep call, Zach, you said you had a topic you wanted to address. I don't know. I didn't want to leave that out before we go to the audience for questions. We can come back if you.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. I think from a tribalist perspective that I feel like also affects us here in the state is that, what are we doing to build up our entrepreneurs? And I'm speaking to that note because I am also wearing a couple hats today as a tribal liaison with the UNM Rainforest Innovations. And as a tribal liaison, my duty is to go out, identify the entrepreneurial cliffs that we face on reservation lands within the state of New Mexico. We have about 23 tribes here in the state of New Mexico that don't have a rural business development office or business development office of whatsoever that exists on their tribal nations, yet they remain sovereign. So what are we doing to build up those ecosystems there? And that's the work that I currently conduct. And so a lot of that I feel affects kind of just socially everywhere. And why is that? And I feel like, looking back in history, we as indigenous people, we're still trying to catch up. We're still trying to catch up to the disenfranchisement that we faced with first contact. And I feel like, what can we do to now work on building up that generational wealth that was once severed? And that's by adapting to our current conditions. And that's something that we've overcome so much things in the past that we're still here today. Why is that? And so with that ability to always come out on top, now we seem to be looked at from the top. And I feel like those are things that we can address as tribal nations that can then affect state governments and then federal governments. And that's by being able to establish this type of model where we check in on each other. As a liaison, I'm also an entrepreneur, where I'll go out and help other entrepreneurs understand the navigational parts of, like, what is a business plan? How do you do that? How do you write that? What type of resources exist that I can refer them to? That is funny because they're writing a business plan to do reservation-based businesses, but there is no template, there is no toolkit that exists for them out there. And so as UNMRI, we're able to provide those toolkits based off of our own business plans that we've created, developed, are sustaining these businesses now as entrepreneurs. Now we get to share that as trailblazers. And so those are some of the models that I know we can share through the state of New Mexico now, as we're building up these great things just off of this little program of tribal liaisonship. And so I think that's something that I feel like, again, that can affect across the board rather than just, let's only focus on tribal nations, when a lot of our people reside on and off the reservation themselves too. So that's a solution that I want to bring to the table, is how can we work together like that? How can we work together to check in on each other within this vast network that we do have, support each other, support ones that are following us, and continue to have others follow in that path that we're creating now. So thank you so much for that opportunity to share that.
Sure, thank you. Okay, we'll go to the audience and online for questions. I'm supposedly receiving some on my text messages. They haven't come in yet, but we'll go with the crowd if they're. Yeah.
I don't know names, but the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit, which has been brought by, I think, the natives against the state, saying you are not educating our children. And I sub at Algodones, which is like about 95% native, and I see the lack of individualization to educate, our natives. You have a Keros, which is a non-written language. It's all oral, and we're pounding them with, short and long A's, and it's just, I see a dichotomy there. And you have children, and as a teacher, I'm really struggling with this. What kind of creativity can I come up with as a retired teacher, a system? I'm more interested in system development right now, to reach this specific, I'm obviously, Anglo, but how do you reach this specific population? We keep hanging at 50, on our testing. Is it the test or is it our education system? That was a long question. I'm sorry.
I'd like to briefly answer that. We rolled out a survey within our school districts to understand what our children want and need when it pertains to what the cafeteria provides for them. And as a little agriculture cooperative, we were able to then establish, they don't want outside foods. They want blue corn mush. They want Navajo dried steamed corn stew. They want tamales. They want enchiladas. They want all these cultural foods that we're known for within the Southwest. That's what they want. That's what they're yearning for, but they don't get that because we don't listen to our children. You're young, you need to listen to me. I am the adult. I am the older one. And then when you look at our politicians and our government structure, that's exactly how they treat us as entrepreneurs. They treat us like children. They treat us like toddlers and babies. And, we don't need a binky anymore. We need to, start making our own food. We need to start, growing our own food. What does that look like? And that will eventually grow our ecosystem in that sense. And so that's how I see quality education, is it affects the ones that are teaching, because then they're learning from the young ones, and it's just reciprocity. You got to live it. I think that's simply that. For Navajo language, for example, you can't teach it orally and literaturely. You have to teach it and live it in that sense. You got to be there with your grandma out in the boonies, raising the sheep together in that sense. You got to live it, that experience, that authenticity that goes with it. You can't just say, oh, I'm attend this class and get it through oral and written. You got to live it. And I think that's something that can go across the board that we tend to forget about because of modern day distractions.
Well, and I think that's something that they were talking about previously too, about living. How do we do a better job of educating about entrepreneurship or about STEM or about, and so looking at how is that then something that we all live, right? And whether you're rural, urban, tribal, or wherever, how do we do a better job of that in New Mexico? And I think that is an interesting idea, because that'll then breed on and on.
Just the concern that she brought forward. So when it comes to trying to assist people when it comes to the school systems, when you're dealing with tribal communities, what I've noticed, I'm with the executive director with Southwest Native Assets Coalition and also a tribal entrepreneur liaison for UNM as well. We see it a lot of where there's not a lot of accessibility in the school systems, particularly something that I noticed even with my children was that, you're dealing with a community where they have limited accessibility, like we've been stressing. Many of these students that go to these schools are living in rural communities. They don't have accessibility to the internet. So giving them a tablet, sending them home, and expecting them to complete that homework when there's a language barrier, there's a competency barrier, there's an accessibility barrier, we're expecting a lot of them to just gravitate towards that change, as opposed to, not really allowing that conversation to come to say that there is a sense of shame that goes into that when you're dealing with these tribal communities, because you have these tribal students that are coming in that are trying to adapt to that society of what the regular school system is telling you that you need to have. And at the same time, when it comes to that accessibility of education and everything, it's not that fair. It's not that, it's not there, because we have many individuals that are visual learners. There are a lot that learn orally. And I think that when it comes to that accessibility, it's just understanding that not everybody in that group of learning can achieve that without that full understanding. Yeah. Yeah, and we've seen it, and I say that a lot only because, just as Zach had mentioned before, when you're dealing with tribal communities, a lot of them speak in their own native tongues, and so when they do go home, a lot of what we learn in our homes as tribal community members is we learn our culture and our heritage first. We don't learn what Western society has as far as asset and wealth building and education and fundamentals of education. We learn it differently. Now, can we adapt? Yes, we can. But again, it's an accessibility and a competency issue.
I would like to give a plug for all of you to please contact your senators and representatives on the federal level, as the FCC just released a letter saying they would no longer support the ACP. And if you don't know what that is, you're fortunate. It is the affordable, it's for affordable connectivity. and that is the fund that was set up during the pandemic so that people in rural areas could get and could pay for internet. That is a vital, to me, a vital lifeline for New Mexico. I grew up I went to high school in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, which, as many of you know, is far northern New Mexico. Your big city is Farmington. And that reality really tinged my accessibility. Going to something like Girls State, and I was supposed to be all in, was very embarrassing. We didn't have the internet. What was this internet thing you're talking about? We didn't have that in Pagosa. We had cows and horses and sheep, and this is what we did. And so I think about that a lot with New Mexico and our rural areas, and how can we then allow someone who maybe doesn't want to work in that type of industry to still live in their hometown, so that Main Street isn't dead, so that things can still survive, the small business can still exist, so we can still be weird in whatever area we are, we can still be Berkey quirky or whatever. It's important to have that connectivity, so I would encourage you to contact those people to tell them to refund the ACP. But even perhaps your state representatives and state senators, we do have a surplus, and we do have money that's untagged from other funds and other revenue sources that we aren't utilizing or leveraging to support that availability of broadband, because that is connectivity, that is being able to learn what others learn, that is being able to do a YouTube to learn how to change the oil in your truck. It's a big deal, and that's what's going to spur, I think, other entrepreneurs to be able to do other things and connect and be able to work from home in a different sense than just literally working from your living room, but working from your hometown. So thank you. I'll jump off my soapbox now.
A question is that part of your dialogue is solutions. So I think you have a lot of solutions in this room. And part of the way you learn it in a different way is through storytelling. So I completely agree. With Zach, I've known his family and his cousins. So it was a natural to understand how he could be a part of the Rainforest team. And, you know, through Lisa and Cecilia Pacheco, that program has thrived because there was no data. So it's another thing we miss. We don't know because there's no data. Nobody ever asked. So if you collect data sets that can help people understand the issue. I've been an engineer for 33 years now. I am not like the typical engineer at Sandia National Labs. Never will be. Don't even think about that hardly at all. I'm there to do my job. But what I learned is that I can teach somebody else by having them stand by me, work with me. So think about internships one-on-one. You can teach young people a lot when you take them out in the field with what you do and show them, rather than beyond your story, come with me, jump in my car, let's get on an airplane. I had one intern that jumped on an airplane the first time we met because that's what I required. We're going to California to go see a tribe and see how they put their wind turbines in. It's really something at an individual level that is helpful for the 40%, because I'm part of the 40% and I beat your odds now, I'm part of the 60%. I'm very proud of that, but how do you do that over and over is you teach from what you know, you teach from your experience. So thinking about how do you get the younger technical person in with you, because they're gonna have to learn to negotiate those deals that you rise above it all at some point. You're dealing with money and contracts. They can learn it with you as entrepreneurs if they're working with you side by side. And I think you can understand that is almost the golden nugget, as was said earlier. If people have mentors, they can go above and beyond. And if you don't have them, I can give you a whole handful of my classmates who are no longer in this world because they didn't make it because of those statistics. And yet there's ways that we can break out of what people expect of us, because I had the greatest teachers in the world. I've had a lifetime full of mentors, so I don't want to de-emphasize the business part, but come with me and let me show you. Listen to this conversation with me, and don't make it odd where there's a younger person in the room while you're making a deal, so they understand. I learned that from my executives at Sandia Labs, and so my question is, how can you make opportunities for these students? I was side by side with the executives. I was the gopher, but I listened. I didn't say a word, but I listened and I learned. And I really appreciate you as CEOs to think about how do you grow that next person? And it's your succession plan in a sense, but if you could give me your thoughts about that, because I found it very rewarding to do this kind of planning and thinking ahead.
Real fast, though. I did a open house at my daughter's high school and went into the mechanic shop, and they did not have an EV. They didn't have any battery. And I said, we're getting a car. We're going to bring it in here and we're going to work. And as we scale my company, we're going to bring them in.
Yeah, ich gehe Sandra for that question. I think that's something that hits home, and I think that's something that we can tell those stories of our lived experiences in order to then teach our children what not to do or how to go through those experiences in order to teach them how to survive, but teach them how to thrive. How do we get to that point? For us at Bidii Baby Foods, what we've started is called a farmer in residence, REZ, residence. And so with that, being able to look at our resonomics side of things, doing reservation-based business approaches and creating models out of that, and that starts with data. What do you look at in our children? Not just like they're a part of the 40% and lower, but also, as my other tribal liaison mentioned, is accessibility. We're coming from an area where 30% of our people still don't have running water or electricity. Majority of our roads are non-drivable when it rains or when it snows. And then a lot of our people cannot afford 4x4. So, what can we do to increase that accessibility? And that was something of starting this farmer in residence program, knowing a lot of our children face these challenges. And this farmer in residence program allows them to, when you apply for that application, you gotta have a business plan. You gotta to be able to establish an EIN, take therapy, mandatory. Being able to heal yourself so that way those distractions and bad habits don't continue into your business model and structure and how you do business. And being able to then allocate land that is invested for them already. 2 acres here for this farmer residence, 2 acres for this farmer residence, because on the reservation, we don't own the land. We reside on federal trust land where we cannot use that to leverage loans and funding into our hands. So that's something that we see as also a big challenge. But as Bidii Baby Foods, through our grants, we're able to then apply for shared equipment, applied for shared resources. As a tribal liaison, I'm able to provide and refer them to resources around the state in order to help them do their business plan, while I then teach them technical assistance of traditional farming. Those are some of the ways that we're building up our youth there. All of our farmer and residents are 30 under 30, and we have 6 of them going into this new year. We rolled out our pilot project last year. Now it's a full-time thing, and we've pulled so much data out of that. A lot of our children still face sexual, mental, physical abuse, alcoholism, substance abuse issues where they're being affected by it, or somebody in their household is using it and affecting them. And those are some of the realities that we face because we have a lack of housing for our people. We have a lack of infrastructure. We have lack of workforce development and creation. And so all of these challenges can hit you all at once, and you can ball up and cry about it, or you can create a solution. And that's something that we are able to then not only model through Bidii Baby Foods and our Bend initiative, but also not in our children, but also through UNM Rainforest, where we're able to build a rainforest in the high desert.
So starting a business is easy. You can go online and start a business in like 7 seconds, right? But running a business is hard. Caring about your staff and their kids' braces is hard. So I would also challenge back, it's nice at Sandia that you can get interns. We're not Sandia. And we compete against Sandia for staff, and it's a whole other workforce initiative issue. But looking at how is it easy to have an incubator? It's not easy in New Mexico to have an incubator, to have that capital and create an incubator. It's not easy in New Mexico to have an accelerator. It's not easy in New Mexico to get interns, to get apprentices. And so I would challenge the group of people who are able to do this is that how can you make it where we can hit the easy button for any of us sitting on this stage to hit the easy button to get an intern from a university or other means? And how can we get into these other programs? Because running a business is not easy at all.
We had a question from online. What are some of the things that make it different to start and run a business on tribal land? Why is a different template needed?
One of the key issues is land. You don't own the land, and that when you reside on that area, I'll use ourselves as a prime example. We cannot scale up. We cannot build a dry, cold food processing area because where we reside where we work our farm is an agricultural land use permit that is leased to us by the BIA and leased to us by the Navajo Nation. And so we're sovereign, but we're not sovereign. And so with that ability, that means we have to look for, we recently acquired our manufacturing permit last year, but we have to rely on the state's food policy and oversight. We cannot rely on tribal state and the tribal food oversight and policy for manufacturing permits that don't exist. So that's why we have to go secondary to the state of New Mexico to then acquire a manufacturing permit, which then our permitting is granted to us through the Gallup Food Pantry, which is 100 miles away from our farm, which is an hour and a half drive, 2 hours when you're going the speed limit. But those are things that we have to face infrastructurally. There's not a public access for a commercial kitchen on the Navajo Nation anywhere. And so out of that 200-something square thousand miles, we have to go to Gallup to rely on border town infrastructure to then get our manufacturing permit, to then get food policy, get all of the ball rolling in that area to then provide some traditional food for our children. Then it goes back into our reservation in that sense. That is a prime example of where, back to the land use permit, rules and regulations that reside on the back of those is that you cannot build a permanent foundation on agricultural land use permits. So with that means you cannot build a home, you cannot build a manufacturing process site, you cannot build storage for your tools that can be stolen, storage for your food, processing area. All of those cannot exist because because of your rules and regulations. If you attempt to build it, then you relinquish your lease, then you lose that land. And so, with that, we're barred in a lot of areas. So what can we do to work outside that box that we're continuously put in is that, okay, yurts, agritourism is another area. We can build yurts that don't have a permanent foundation. We can rely on border town infrastructure to provide these infrastructural needs as a business, and being able to rely on building up our own interns and incubators, so that way it's tailored based off of our own lived experiences to our children that can then relate to those challenges and be a part of something bigger. So those are some of those unique challenges that we face, and then some, but I want to keep it brief there. So thank you for that question.
All right. I kind of have a statement and also a question, but I want to bring it back to creatives in entrepreneurship, and how are we really bringing them into the ecosystem? So silos, ecosystem building. What are we doing to create solutions? I'm originally from New Mexico. Spent some time working in the tech startup in New York City, more in the creative entrepreneurship, and I really found that New Mexico has unique opportunities for global solutions, and all the solutions are here. We have 95% of our farm is small farms. That's the way the globe is looking for solutions to fight climate change. We have diversity. We have everything that the world is looking for in solutions. But going back to what is our own vision of our own state in building that global solution and participating in that from being entrepreneurs. And I think you guys from the earlier panel to right now, we don't really continue to talk about it, but creative entrepreneur, the creative entrepreneur is what we were talking about, creating a vision. You guys create a vision without even knowing you guys could, but you guys said we can. So when we look at that, we are able to look at solutions and not our problems. And so I really want to see like what are we doing as ecosystem builders and people who have been successful in building New Mexico entrepreneur systems. How are we doing? What are we going to do to kind of create the vision that we want?
Yeah, I mean, attracting entrepreneurs to the state of New Mexico, or retaining entrepreneurs in the state of New Mexico, understanding what an entrepreneur is, and knowing, like I was saying earlier, like most entrepreneurs before they start a company, they don't really care about starting a company. Like they're not looking for a place where there's workers. They're not looking for a place where there's, I'm not speaking for all entrepreneurs. Obviously there are some, but entrepreneurs are just like looking to live a good life and looking to like be able to, explore their own passions. And they're not necessarily looking to go and work at some big company in a major city. Entrepreneurs live a little bit outside of the box. They live a little bit outside of the norm. And what's great about New Mexico is that like it's actually highly attractive to entrepreneurs. You can think about the entrepreneur as a visionary. They create, they're similar to an artist. They can see the future and then work towards making it happen. And for hundreds of years, and especially the last 120 years, New Mexico has been very attractive to artists, just naturally. And the same, I think, is also true for entrepreneurs. But we don't really tell that story. People don't know that. People know it's a great place for artists. People know it's a great place for retirees. People don't really know. Like young people in their 20s, they think that this is a barren desert with no access to the mountains, with nothing, with like nothing going on, in a bad education system, and like that. And we all know that that's false. Like there's so much here. There's so much rich resources here and cool people. At the end of the day, like my friends who come to New Mexico, the entrapment part is because the people here are just nicer and cooler and think and talk in a more authentic way, in a more real way. People are like, God, thank God I'm out of LA. Like what a shit show of a place. Sorry, LA. But and it's because they're tired of the culture of it. And I think that we had New Mexico found a little bit of luck in a way, from a sort of identity perspective, during the pandemic. I think a lot of people started to realize, like, I want out of the city. I want out of San Francisco. I want out of LA. I want to be in nature. I want to be at a place that has sunshine and has space. And there's an opportunity right now in New Mexico for us to paint that picture to a new generation of visionaries, that this is the place where potential exists. And this is a place that is like doper to live in than anywhere else. I'm like, that to me is the beginning of the ecosystem. Once you attract people here, the ecosystem will start to take care of itself. But it's understanding like what is attractive about this place for people in their early 20s to consider this place a place that they can develop their career. And I'm not talking about like people who are working in a certain trade or people who are working in biotech, or I'm talking about people who are outside of that and thinking about how they're going to start a multi-million-dollar business. And they need space to do that, similar to an artist. Like, they need space to do that, and they need a good place to incubate that. And so I think we have the ingredients to attract people. And we just don't tell our story to, in that way. I have so many friends who, once they get here, they're like, I had no idea. I'm like, yeah, totally. It's a really amazing place.
More green chili.
Thank you, Vince. That's a perfect way to wrap this up. And thank you all for participating.